So getting into reproduction, these two sea stars are spawning. So the top one is a male spawning sperm, and the bottom one is a female spawning eggs. Males and females are typically separate. That's called gonochoristic in sea stars. And what you can see is that they're actually extruding these gametes out of their body into the seawater. That's called broadcast spawning. These eggs and sperm meet in the water column and fertilize, and then they start developing into larvae. Once the eggs and sperm fertilize in the water column, they develop into larvae, which is what these are. These are Bipinnaria larvae of sea stars. This is the early stage, Bipinnaria at the top. And down here we have what's called a Brachyolaria larvae. That's when they have these long arms. And this is sort of an in-between stage. So they take a while. They're out there in weeks to months as they develop. And during all this time, they don't have that pentaradial symmetry that the adults do. They have bilateral symmetry. So if you look at this animal, you can see that if you were to draw a line down the middle of it, it's actually symmetrical on either side. And same with this one and this one. A couple things here are that they move with cilia. So they have little cilia hairs all over them. They can swim around. And they use those cilia not only to move, but to capture food. And so that's part of what those arms are for. They're for gathering that food. So they are eating larvae. They're out there for a long time. And they have mouths and stomachs and anus, just like an adult animal. So this is a really neat video of some larvae swimming under a microscope. You can see they actually move pretty quick. They have those cilia that they use to zoom through the water. And this is a really neat thing where they stuck a larvae in a single place and put plastic pellets in the water and actually watched the vortices form. So what you can see is as the animal swims, it creates these little whirlpools along its body line, and that also not only propels it forward, but entrains and traps algae and other little things that they eat right close to their body. So you can see this is going out, forming a vortex, and in the lee of that vortex, it allows it to capture food that sticks right to this slower moving section of their body and get caught in that cilia and then transported along its body to its mouth. So these larvae spend a couple weeks or a couple months out in the open ocean swimming around, and after that it becomes time to settle back down and to become adults. So what they do is they go through a full-on metamorphosis, just like a butterfly does. But it's a little crazier, in my opinion. So these little things are out there, no eyes, nothing, and they find their way back to the rocks. There's recent evidence they actually use the sound of the rocks and the turbulence of the water crashing onto rocks to locate where they are in space. And what they do is they take these, the top of their body, and they stick it to the rock using this little sort of suction cup right here. And they stick their body to the rock, and this little section right there becomes the adult animal. So they take and stick to the rock, and then what you can see here is it's sort of shriveling up, this section here. That's the larval body. It actually sheds that off and gets rid of it. This becomes the new sea star, and as it settles onto the rock, it starts to look even more sea star-like. It changes from bilateral to radial symmetry. This animal has just settled, and these are its first little tube feet. So cute. And this animal is about a month old. It's a sunflower star, and it's just starting to grow its first arms. What I think is just mind-blowing about this whole thing is they go and they form an entirely new digestive system, a new mouth, new anus, and everything. They get rid of the old one and replace it with a new one. those larvae are really important in species that broadcast spawn, but not every sea star does broadcast spawning. This is my favorite animal, the six-armed sea star. In real life, it's about yay big or smaller, and it is actually a brooder. So in the springtime, if you're out in a tide pool and you find one of these and flip it over, you might see something like this, where it's holding on, the females at least, are holding on to a bunch of eggs. And if you look a little closer, you can see that they've got it out inside their mouth. They actually don't eat the entire time they're brooding those eggs, so it's a really vulnerable stage for them. And after a month or two of this excellent mother doing her work, they develop into these tiny little sea stars with no larval phase that actually just crawl away from their moms. We've covered sea star anatomy, and I just want to take a moment to talk about the ecology of sea stars. You'll have a whole other video on the importance of one ochre star that I study called Piesaster, which is a keystone species, but I wanted to highlight a few more. This is the sunflower star, Pycnopodia. It's found along the US West Coast. It's that one with 20 arms. And it actually eats sea urchins. And so sea urchins eat kelp. And kelp is a foundational species for a kelp forest, right? A lot of things eat it, a lot of things live in it, a lot of things grow up inside of it. And they're really important because recently they've actually been widely extirpated by sea star wasting disease throughout much of their range. We're actually considering them as a potential red list species pretty soon here. And there are very few of them left. If you find one, please email me. Nate will give you extra credit. And what's happening now in places in California is without this sea star to keep the urchins in check, plus a couple other factors, the urchins have just gone bananas and they're mowing down the kelp forests. And one of the things that's on the potential list of things to do is to get these sea stars back. Another really ecologically important sea star is the crown of thorns starfish. It's found on the Great Barrier Reef. It has venomous spines and it eats coral, and it goes all over the place and moves really fast, and it can devour whole patches of reef pretty quickly. When I was there, they actually had divers out there just harpooning them to save the reef. Now we are going to do a little bit of anatomy review. These are probably the more famous sea stars out there. This is Patrick from SpongeBob and Peaches from Finding Nemo, and Peach, excuse me. And I just wanted to point out a couple of the anatomically incorrect features that bug me every time I watch Disney movies. So firstly, they both have eyes. Sea stars don't have eyes. And secondly, Peaches has tube feet all over the place. No ambulacral grooves, it's just a mess in there. But at least Peach has its mouth in the right place. Patrick, on the other hand, walks upright like a human, not with its belly on the ground. And we can't even tell whether this front of Patrick is the dorsal side or the ventral side. Does it have tube feet? Does it not? Is it the back? Is it the front? And if it is, say, its back, then Patrick's belly button is really his anus. And if it is the front or the ventral side, then Patrick's mouth actually should be down by his belly button. So we don't know what's going on with Patrick. He's an anomaly, but now you can too be just as bothered by anatomically incorrect Disney movies as I am.